Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, or whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this. I'm back again. This is hardware. Make no mistake, this is hardware. Got doing a couple guest hosts in the next couple days. As congratulations to Jackson and Izzy Danner on their wedding. They're now on their honeymoon for the next couple weeks during football season. So of all people, Jackson having a honeymoon during football season. Go figure. But I'm glad he's happy. And joining me as guest host is Brock Vieira of Midnight Sports Today and Team NBS Media. And we've had many conversations in the past. So I know the podcast, this episode is in good hands with Brock as the guest host.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to finally, be on the show, contributing in this way compared to just our usual discussions about whatever is going on in college football. Before we begin, I also want to shout out Jackson. Just once again, say congratulations to you and the missus. It's been a long time coming. I mean, I've known about this wedding since the moment I met him, and that was like 2 years ago. So it's nice to see that everything's finally the dreams finally came true. They got to enjoy that special day, and now they're off to Paris for their honeymoon. Just want to say enjoy that. And I know it's gonna be difficult for him to watch the games while he's out there, but I'm sure he's gonna have his mind on other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And rightfully so. So, without further ado, though, what a great week one it was, and Jackson did everyone a solid by having his wedding on the Sunday. Even though the games were still, the games are mostly blowouts on Sunday itself, but a lighter slate and everything. But just what weekend it was. A lot to talk about, and of course, this being the hardware, we do want to stir the pot a bit on the Heisman race and some awards. But before that. We're going to continue our tradition of honoring an HBCU player of the week. So first up for me, I want to pick Jada Byers, and I was a bit off my prediction of Jada Byers' rushing stats. I projected that he would run for 300 yards against the lowly Morehouse defense. That didn't happen because Virginia Union coasted against Morehouse in the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic. They won 45-13. The last score for Morehouse being a window dressing score, but Byers had 24 carries for 149 yards. And Jada Byers is a Harlan Hill front runner. Harlan Hillward being the best player in Division Two, and he could take home also the Black College Football Hall of Fame Player of the Year award. So a great opportunity for the country, really on NFL Network without much competition during the afternoon to see one of the best backs in the country, Jada Byers.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a phenomenal performance of him, and just phenomenal performances all across the board. I got to shout out a gentleman at the losing effort of his performance, and that was Rico Powers of Jackson State University. The 6'2", 187-pound receiver from Savannah, Georgia, had himself a day. He had 4 receptions for 119 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for Jackson State as they fell to the traditional Florida A&M. So the Florida A&M had a great game that day. They had two running backs, Terrell Jennings and Jaquez Yant. I just want to shout out. Had over 70 rushing yards each, which is fantastic for them. Of course, for me personally, I come from the Bill Carroll school of thought, which, in case any of you guys know, I follow him on Twitter. He's a great football historian, great black football historian, and just a great football mind. We do a show together as well, and he would always tell me about the old passing concepts back in the day from Florida A&M. Obviously, the job done on the rushing game, dominated in performance. I expect to be a lot closer considering it is a conference matchup. But well done to Florida A&M. But I'll get on the losing side. I'll give Rico Powers his flowers.
Yeah, I like the rhyme there for sure. But it was good to see Florida A&M win an Orange Blossom Classic, with this being their last appearance in the Orange Blossom Classic for the near future. So we both pick games on what has become HBCU Sunday with those two classics taking the national stage. But going on to our main topics of discussion, it's September 5th when we're recording this. But of course it's never too early to dive into the Heisman talk. And for me, the first person I want to bring up is a guy that Jackson and I have been pretty much hyping up since week one of 2021. He had a really good freshman year for Tulane, 20 touchdowns, I believe, and he also had like 7 rushing touchdowns or so. Regressed a bit in 2021, but 2022, the country saw what Michael Pratt could do on Tulane. And even though Tajay Spears took most of the attention for in that offense, rightfully so. What a great back he was. Pratt did good in his own right, did really good in his own right. And I think I've said before that I think Michael Pratt is the most pro ready quarterback in the group of five, while Frank Harris has the biggest ceiling. That's just my opinion. But Michael Pratt this past week really showed, that I guess in year four that he is a force to be reckoned with. He went 14 of 15 for 294 yards and four touchdowns against not an FCS opponent, but against South Alabama, a team that almost beat UCLA last year, a team that won 10 games as well and berthed in the New Orleans Bowl. So this week, I think Tulane has Ole Miss, I believe. Just gonna check that really quick. Yeah, they have Ole Miss this week at home in Yeoman. Do you think with the win against the Rebels that Michael Pratt can seed himself into the Heisman conversation?
I think he absolutely puts himself in the Heisman conversation with the win against Ole Miss for a multitude of reasons. One, Ole Miss themselves just had themselves a great game last week. I think 73-0 win against Mercer, but don't quote me on their opponent. And in that game, we saw Jackson Dart obviously go off as he was named starter, but also Spencer Sanders, the transfer from Oklahoma State, had himself a nice little day as well. So if Michael Pratt can come in and outperform not only one but two quarterbacks, for which the whole country has seen for years, I think that would be huge for him. I mean, I'm. It's funny that you mentioned that because you and I never talked about it. Jackson and I never talked about it. Or you two and I just never talked about it in general. But I had the same feeling about Michael Pratt in 2021. You saw it at the beginning of that game against Oklahoma and Norman. Again, they had to get moved, from uh, Louisiana because of a hurricane, and with everything going against it, Oklahoma, I believe at that time, being the number one team in the nation, and Spencer Rattler being the everyone thought he would be the number one pick. I didn't, but that's a different story for another time. He went out, he balled, but then that season he had his ups and downs. And then obviously they got it together last year. They had an incredible 12-2 season, beat USC in the Cotton Bowl, won the conference championship. But like you mentioned, Tajay Spears was kind of the spearhead of that offense. But what you really want to see in a quarterback is growth, and you've seen that every step of the way. You saw him go from being a guy that had potential but had up and down seasons to establish himself as a more consistent passer last season. And to me, this year, even though it was only South Alabama, and no disrespect to South Alabama, he really established himself as a solid threat in this country. You already mentioned his passing yards, but he also had 11 carries for 39 yards rushing. So when given the opportunities, he can make plays on his feet. Again, he just checks boxes for me up and down the board, like a lot of quarterbacks have been doing week one. When a bunch of other quarterbacks that we all kind of had high expectations for haven't, I think that if he beats Ole Miss, even if it's a close game, there's no way he isn't in the conversation. Especially since once again, national game, and everyone remembers Tulane for knocking off USC and the Heisman winner, Caleb Williams. So not only would he have already knocked off the existing Heisman winner, but he can knock out not only one, but two potential Heisman candidate quarterbacks in one go. There's no way you can't put him on your list if that happens.
Yeah, I would have to definitely agree. I forgot about not forgot, but I didn't really factor that into my whole discussion with him being in the Heisman conversation last year's Cotton Bowl and him beating the actual Heisman winner. Of course, having the game-winning drive late in the game and everything. I didn't factor that in. I think also too something that's interesting to look back is as I was looking up as you were saying. 20. I feel like it's a 2-year process for like a lot of Group of Five candidates, and thinking about Michael Pratt makes you think about Mackenzie Milton in 2017 and 2018, where Milton peaked at 6 in the Heisman voting in 2018 after everything that happened in 2017. Same result, undefeated regular season and everything, but was 6 in the Heisman voting. And the injury may have played a little part in that, but I like to think that the voting was solidified come championship weekend or like come Black Friday when the injury happened. But yeah, also it's also to note too, like we've talked to, you mentioned Tajay Spears as well as I did, but Temple only ran for 142 yards this past week, and their leading rusher had 41 yards, Mekhi Hughes. Like you said, Pratt had 11 carries, 39 yards, second leading rusher. So, I mean, Pratt was pretty much, I guess he was the X factor in this game to say because a lot of those rush yards probably came during garbage time as Tulane leaped to a I think it was a 31-17 lead in the fourth quarter and everything. So a lot of the rush yards came in garbage time. So of course, too, against Ole Miss, excuse me, a bigger SEC line, a more athletic SEC line, and of course a high-powered offense. His numbers are going to be inflated, and it will be sort of a quarterback duel against Jackson Dart. So I'm excited to see where this happens. Of course, having the game in Yeoman instead of Oxford will help a lot with the home field advantage as well. I know Ole Miss fans or the Ole Miss AD was complaining about having only 3,000 tickets available for Ole Miss fans, and what can you say? Tulane doesn't play in the Superdome anymore, so gone are those days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've never been there, but I love their stadium. But man, do I wish that they still played in the Super Bowl. The old school pictures from back in the day, which I actually seen off your account, just made you a little bit nostalgic of the days past in college football. May I just add that I don't think Ole Miss should have any tickets to go. If you want to attend the game as an Ole Miss fan, you better learn how to buy tickets in New Orleans. Like maybe that's just kind of the cynic in me, but I still remember a day when college football used to be regional. A lot of people used to have cultural pride associated with it. And as far as I'm concerned, the only seats that Ole Miss needs is, two seats for every player so their parents can come if they want. And any extra, you can just, use them for the band. Who cares? So I think Ole Miss AD might need to, check his words on that one.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was a very petty argument. Well, yeah, petty thing for him, because yeah, I mean, and if you're 2-2 in this game, you want every advantage that you can get. If I want as little Ole Miss fans as possible in Yeoman Stadium. So I don't blame them for just doing a 3,000 ticket allotment for that game. Going on to our next topic, a little recap of the week. This week Michigan played East Carolina in the first ever game. Well, yeah, I guess first ever game on Peacock, first ever college football game as part of the Big Ten package. A 30-3 win over East Carolina. Um, and I mean, it was impressive. Michigan raced out to a lead, but it wasn't exactly like, a mind-boggling performance. JJ McCarthy was impressive though, throwing for over 200 yards. I think he only had four incompletions, and three touchdowns as well. And then Blake Corum in his first game back, 73 carries, only 10, I mean, sorry, 73 yards and only 10 carries and a touchdown. On that team, who do you think is the more of a Heisman front runner, Blake Corum or JJ McCarthy?
Oh, that is so tough because I have such love for Blake Corum. But seeing what I saw yesterday, one, you gotta have an outrageous year as a running back. Well, actually, just as a non-quarterback in order to win the award. And I don't feel like Corum is the same Corum that we saw in years past. I think that he still has some problems with that injury. He looks a little bit slower, a little less explosive. We saw in his big runs is because his offensive line opened up a gap as wide as a barn door for him. And that's not a knock against him, but I just don't know if his body is the same. Only time will tell. JJ McCarthy obviously has the advantage because he plays the quarterback position. He has the athleticism to make plays to the air and on the ground. And, well, Michigan has a cupcake schedule until they play Ohio State, which they do play them at home as well. So I think that between the two, you got to go with JJ.
Yeah, I mean, it pains me to say because I mean, I'm a guy with, values nostalgia, I'm a purist, I guess, for the Heisman. Love when running backs win the Heisman. Love the day and age when, running backs are the center of an offense. But JJ McCarthy, I wouldn't say he's worth all the hype that he gets, being like with people saying him being like a top five pick. He's a great quarterback. Make no mistake about it. And I mean, I really feel like he provides a sort of edge that Michigan hasn't seen at that position really since, I mean, I'm gonna say that maybe Devin Garner might have been like the last guy really to give them that edge at that position. But McCarthy is great. I think the thing with Corum too, I think Michigan will certainly use him when it matters more. But I think the worst thing that could have happened to Blake Corum in terms of his Heisman candidacy was last year's Ohio State Michigan game when Donovan Edwards ran for 1 million yards on that Ohio State defense. And if you look at the box score from Saturday, Edwards had more carries than Corum did. I mean, he had 12 carries for 37 yards. Now, granted, I didn't watch the whole game, so I assume a lot of those carries happened when the game was out of reach for East Carolina. But that is definitely a sign where Michigan is more willing to balance the load with Edwards and Corum.
So yeah, so I had the unfortunate responsibility of actually watching the game, and good lord, from top to bottom was it horrible. Now, between Michigan honoring Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tirico and Chris Sims, I think it's Chris. Yeah, that's his name. I forget. But basically, they say, oh, how they want to honor their coach and JJ wearing the free Harbaugh. I thought that they were going to take the logo and take out the words Michigan, like go across the banner, across the M, and just put Harbaugh in there at this point. It was so annoying. Now, when it comes to the game, they did start out with Corum, and Corum did seem a little bit hesitant. on certain plays. I don't know if that's because of his vision or because he didn't see something he liked, or that's just he's hesitant because he just tore his knee up. The last game he ever played of football. But they went back to Donovan Edwards kind of early. I do believe Corum had like 77 yards, something like that. So he did outperform him, but that also came off like two big runs as well. So I think as the season goes on, unfortunately for Blake Corum, we're going to see a lot more Donovan Edwards, and we're going to see a lot more Donovan Edwards early. I don't even know if he's going to be the starter at the end of the year. I think Michigan is more going to resort to a 1-2 punch. The big question to see is how is this offense going to operate this week, considering that they're doing that whole change of head coach thing. Is it still going to be Minter's show, or are they still, or just what's that going to look like? And then obviously, how's this offense going to look when Jim Harbaugh comes back and the offense coordinator can go back to, not Minter, sorry, Minter's defense coordinator, but more the offense coordinator for Michigan. How's that going to change depending on who's the head coach? Last week there was one head coach. This week it's his son and also Mike Hart, and then obviously Harbaugh comes up week 4. I don't know who their head coach is week 3, so that's something to keep an eye out on. All I can say is just to add to it, I think JJ McCarthy has the better shot, but I was not impressed with his performance. Yeah, he did put up good numbers, but man, just add that first touchdown, he was clearly past the line of scrimmage when that ball was thrown. I mean, I don't even know. Like they say, because the rest didn't have the sideline shot and they got indisputable evidence. I thought I saw indisputable evidence. I'm pretty sure not half, 99% of the country outside of Ann Arbor agrees with me. I just think that there's Michigan is in a weird place right now because I don't feel as confident as I initially had them come in. I think the defense is stout without a doubt, but I want to make sure Roman Wilson kind of fixes those drops early. He didn't seem real confident catching the ball. I don't think they got Cornelius Johnson involved in that offense enough. And I do have some questions about this offensive line. Yes, they are returning 3 starters, but they are missing their center and also right tackle, who obviously both went on to the NFL. So I with all those major concerns, you just again gotta go JJ with the front runner for the Heisman if it comes from Michigan. But don't expect that trophy to be in Ann Arbor at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I do not either, to be honest with you. I guess on the last team with the trophy going on Ann Arbor. I think it's interesting too. You mentioned the coaching thing. That's something I didn't initially think of. I think Mike Hart is the head coach for the second one. Mike Hart, a guy that we grew up watching. It's great to see him emerging in the coaching ranks. I was a huge Mike Hart fan as a kid. So I mean, I'm kind of inclined to believe that maybe Corum gets eased more back into the flow against UNLV. But I also tend to believe that the timing's kind of off with Mike Hart being the coach for the second half. And if Blake Corum is in against UNLV in the second half, then clearly something has went wrong for Michigan for them to still be using Corum. I mean, no disrespect to UNLV. I have them going to a bowl game this year, but it's just not that just shouldn't happen. They shouldn't risk injury for Corum against UNLV to bolster his carries, which I do expect heavy doses of the run with Hart coaching the second half, but just not with Corum. So I think it's interesting. It's sad. Hopefully another running back emerges into the fold, but that remains to be seen. I mean, maybe like Quinshawn Judkins of Ole Miss. That's another guy I would have thought about. But otherwise, I mean, the running back ranks look pretty thin. Also, Braylon Allen, but Wisconsin's passing the ball nowadays. So um,
Yeah, I mean, for Wisconsin, I don't think Allen has a shot for 2 reasons. One, like you mentioned, they pass the ball a lot more. I think Mordecai had over 30 passes last year with Buffalo. But more importantly, they have another dude, that running back, Chaz Malusi, who is splitting carries with him. You need to have a workhorse at tailback. And though Allen is a workhorse, he's just not going to get the workhorse responsibilities. So I think that his numbers could be skewed. Quite frankly, there's only 2 running backs in the country outside of Judkins that I could see have a legitimate shot at the Heisman, and one of those is Cal's Jaden Ott. Ott had a really good game against North Texas. I think he had 26 carries, 188 yards. But again, a Cal running back, like, how hard is that going to be? And the last one, he didn't have a really impressive game against Coastal Carolina, so I do have some concerns. But Carson Steele, this is a guy that I was very high on out of Ball State. I think he's coming into an offense at UCLA that's obviously much better, much more pass oriented, but that also means a lot more holes if he's able to break off runs. We already saw Chip Kelly revitalize Zach Charbonnet's career, and I think still could. I mean, his career doesn't even need to be revitalized. He was balling out at Ball State, now 1,600 total yards last year. So I think if they can establish themselves, obviously Dante Moore, I think, has established himself as QB1 at Westwood. So if that happens, expect a little bit more out of Steele. But those 2 gentlemen out of the Pac-12 and Judkins, I mean, There's really not another. Unfortunately, there's really not another running back out there, and unfortunately, teams like Alabama aren't producing the backs that they used to, and Texas, Roshan and Bijan are gone, so there goes that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe another running back will come out of the blue, which I mean, I don't think anyone's expecting Corum to have the year he did last year. So maybe it's just someone that we just haven't even thought about at this point. But I would have to agree, Brock. Going on to our next topic and staying in the Big Ten. Actually, I'm gonna do a quick audible, really quick. I'm not sure how long this discussion will be, but this was late. This is a late development. Riley Leonard's Heisman chances. What are your thoughts on those? I know going down the line, Duke has some very vital games. I mean, if they can keep winning, though, they will be in the national title talk because they play Notre Dame, they play Florida State, which also too, if you're a guy like Riley Leonard, those are huge games for your Heisman resume. So I want to know your thoughts. Riley Leonard, fresh off a win over Clemson last night, really, I guess 5 hours ago. What are your thoughts, Brock?
Well, it's always fun to see Dabble Sweeney in peril, but that's
That's
again the conversation for another time. For football matters, but obviously evolving doesn't matter to him. Again, different time. But Riley Leonard was a guy that I was very high on last year. As you start to see Mike Elko's progress at Duke. Now, obviously, the defense is going to be priority number one because he's a defensive-minded coach. But then Leonard was that kind of catalyst. So, Duke is both now putting up points like how they used to on the Cliff, and now they have the defensive end to kind of keep teams down. This is turning into a program where I want to start watching. They kept building and building and building. They had some really impressive performances in the ACC. No, sorry, ACC. And then they won the bowl game last year as well. 9 wins for a program that had some really tough years at the end of Cliff's tenure. And today you come out against Cave Klubnik, who took over for DJ Uyagale, right? So you have high expectations. You have Garrett Riley coming as offensive coordinator. You have one of the more underrated, versatile running backs in the country at Will Shipley. Clemson is known for the wide receivers under Dabble Sweeney, right? So you think that he's gonna come out and he's gonna put up points like TCU was putting up last year, same scheme, and possibly even better players. And not only does he lay an egg, the guy across from him has the most perfect game a quarterback could ask for. Not only did Riley Leonard put himself in the Heisman conversation, he put himself in being a top 5 pick conversation. And here's why. If you look at what GMs look like in the NFL, he checks every box. Does he have good height? Yes. Is he stout? Yes. Is he built like he's not gonna get hurt off one tackle? Yes. Is he athletic? Yes. He's a former basketball player. Does he make accurate passes? Absolutely. Does he make smart decisions? Absolutely. Does he rise to the moment and elevate his team? Bingo. And the most important key thing that I saw today that probably won't weigh heavy on the Heisman voters' mind, but it should if you're a true lover of football. The man gets rid of the ball. There's about 4 or 5 instances where he either could have got sacked and he held onto the ball half a second longer, or he could have got picked and he tried to force something. Sideline. Roll out. Sideline. Easy. Live to play another day. And that's exactly the reason why Duke blew out Clemson. They kept their mistakes low. I think the only real mistake was a fumble and a muff punt. And obviously, it's your first game, so things happen when people are trying to come at you. So he had a stellar game. He has an incredible ability to lift Duke into that conversation. And let's not forget, Daniel Jones was a first round pick out of Duke 5 years ago. So eyes are already on this program. Now, yes, David Cutcliffe did have a reputation for putting quarterbacks in the NFL, most notably Peyton Manning. Well, the Mannings, Peyton and Eli. But people pay attention to quarterbacks coming out of the East Coast, and they already have eyes on Drake May. So and if Drake May is the number 2 quarterback, that means that you're gonna have an opportunity to play him and possibly outperform him in prime time. Jordan Travis is getting traction, like you mentioned. You can go out and beat him. And why can't Duke make it to the ACC championship game? They already knocked off Clemson, and that was like the biggest foe of the year. The ACC, they're gonna suffer a lot of losses. Pitt is not as good as they were in years past. Wake Forest is not as good as they were in years past. Why not? And also, if we also don't know what's happened with Tez Walker out of North Carolina. Yeah, they just smoked South Carolina, but we don't know how good South Carolina is. So if Walker can't get eligible, that's another loss that North Carolina is not going to have when they play Duke. So Riley Leonard, shout out to that young man. He just put himself in a really good position, both for himself and financially.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like you said, Daniel Jones, I mean, like Duke quarterbacks, they have a reputation. Like they have a reputation among pro scouts, really. Even goes back to the Thad Lewis days. Good old Thad Lewis, when we were growing up. Long suffering Thad Lewis. But yeah, I completely agree. Also to the Notre Dame game, I wouldn't sleep on that one as well. I mean, I expect that one to be a network TV game for Duke. It's hosted at Wallace Wade. Sam Hartman looks great early in the season. I mean, so that one, like, I mean that'll be like a Wake Forest Duke game, honestly. But
Yeah,
so I mean, no, go
and
ahead.
I mean, you're looking at Notre Dame defense, and I think that they have one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the entire country. I mean, obviously Marcus Freeman is a brilliant defensive mind, defensive coordinator, and now honestly, leader for them. They also have a guy, Al Golden, that's had multiple stops with multiple different defenses, both the NFL and college, so he understands the schemes going on. But the players that they have this year, for the first time in a long, long time, I'm actually hesitant to be willing to bet against Notre Dame's defense. Yeah,
Yes.
they did play some cupcakes earlier against Navy, which I know that made you feel some type of way, and then obviously last week against Tennessee State. But when you look at how those linebackers attack the ball, how those corners are fearless, they got some, for lack of a better term, dogs at corners for the first time that I can remember. I don't even remember the last time I liked the Notre Dame corner, but Cam Hart is a dude and will be a high draft pick. Botello on one side, Leo File on the other. That linebacker court in general is fantastic, and it really feels like Jean Baptiste has found himself a home in South Bend. Obviously, his career at Ohio State was really up and down, but he seems to have still been taking on that leadership role as the vet. And to me, he's going to be an NFL draft pick as well. So they can get to the quarterback. They can stop the run. They when you thought with gap responsibility, oh, they knock it out of the park. This is a cerebral defense that has incredible instincts, and they're not afraid to show aggression. So if Riley Leonard can put up, you know, standard numbers, this is probably the most NFL like defense we'll probably see the whole season. Especially the way that they mix up looks, the way they mix up assignments, the way they just like to load the box and start who's coming, who's going. Like when you talk about testing his cerebral ability, this will be the game that defines how high he goes in the NFL draft if he declares this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you're more the X's and O's guy for sure, but I mean the Notre Dame defense looks great for sure. I mean, I guess from a layman's perspective, from a writer's perspective, from where I come from, seeing them give up 3 points against light competition, all due respect to Navy, all due respect to Tennessee State, light competition. The true test will come soon, of course, with NC State this weekend and then Ohio State a couple weeks down the road. But that is a great analysis, honestly, too. And I mean, I'm excited. I'm even more excited now for the Notre Dame game now that you say that, with the X's and O's involved. I mean, because of course, me, I'm like thinking the sticker appeal. You're actually looking at the X's and O's, which is great. So going back after a quick audible, before we hit our games of the week, our last topic before we hit the games of the week, this week, big Saturday night is Charlotte versus Maryland. I just love these branding of broadcasts. You got big noon kickoff, Saturday night football, tried and true Saturday night football, and then now you got big Saturday night. It's the options were a bit weak this week. I mean, a bit lean this week, so we're stuck with Charlotte versus Maryland, which as a group of five guy, seeing Charlotte on NBC is amazing. It is must see TV for me, a huge group of five guy. But for more casual fans, they'll be looking for Talia Tungavailoa. And that I think this might serve as Talia's kind of like introduction or reintroduction to the country, as he had a couple games on like Fox. I think Maryland was on Big Noon Kickoff against Michigan last year, and they almost beat Ohio State on ABC last year as well. So this is kind of like a reintroduction this year for Talia Tagovailoa. If Talia goes off against Charlotte, and I think honestly, I think the competition in terms of primetime games, I think it's ideal to be honest with you because you have on network TV, you have Washington at Wisconsin. Sorry, Wisconsin at Washington State. Excuse me, Wisconsin at Washington State. And then on CBS, you have UCLA at San Diego State. Both not bad matchups, but not blockbusters at all. So, do you think that Talia can, make some Heisman noise with, say, maybe like a 5 touchdown, 300-yard performance against the 49ers?
The unfortunate part is no. And he could throw for 9 touchdowns. Unless he reaches double digits, no one's going to care. And I know you'd be like, of course people are going to care about someone tossing 9 touchdowns. But unfortunately for the Heisman voting, perception is everything, and helmet sticker means more than the person inside it. No one wants to see a Maryland guy win the Heisman. It's as simple as that. If you look at the history of the Heisman, the winners have won for a reason. They are the best player in the country, bar none. However, if you look at Heisman voting in general for 1 to 4, 1 to 5, how many people get invited to the ceremony, you're going to see a direct correlation between sticker and ranking. There's a lot of guys that were group five that should have finished a lot higher, but they wouldn't because they didn't play at a Michigan or an Ohio State or a Florida State, because they don't have a Trojan on their helmet. It's just unfortunately, unless he averages 5 touchdowns a game till the end of the year and Maryland somehow goes on this miraculous run that gets them to Indianapolis, he's not going to be in the Heisman consideration, even though he is to his brother.
I think that's a fair point as well. I mean, Maryland, I think if we were to have this conversation last year when Maryland was, less established in the Big Ten, I mean, I agree. I really agree with what you're saying. But I do think there's more of a light at the end of the tunnel than I think you put out because Maryland is more solidified in the Big Ten East. Like realistically, I think they're probably the fifth best team in the Big Ten. They may be better than any Big Ten win. They may win the Big Ten West if they were in the Big Ten West. I think that's not a rare thing to say. Um, that being said, I do think while helmet sticker matters, he does have those high profile games being in the Big Ten East. And Ohio State certainly looks more beatable. I don't know if we're overreacting, but a 23-3 win over Indiana does it's not a great look for Ohio State, really. If we're saying that. I mean, Michigan, I think Michigan still I think the Big Ten just runs through Michigan this year again until further notice. Penn State is a New Year's Six candidate, but I mean, I do think Maryland definitely can play them close, especially with the game being at Maryland Stadium instead of at Beaver. So, I mean, I wouldn't even write off Talia that much even too, because he also gets Michigan at home. So, while Charlotte may not do much for his Heisman consideration, I wouldn't exactly write him out.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Maybe I'm a little cynical because that's what I've seen before. And maybe I'm a little cynical because I literally watched the Heisman Committee screw over another Tagovailoa, his brother. I know Kyler Murray had some big performances to end the season, but so did Tua Tagovailoa as they went undefeated. Keep in mind that Oklahoma lost the Red River Showdown that year to Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Yeah, he did get revenge in the Big 12 championship game, but that's neither here nor there. Tua already got screwed out of the Heisman, so if they're already willing to screw his brother who deserved it, and I know they gave it, and Murray was for multiple reasons, blah 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 blah. But I mean, it's gonna be pretty easy to screw out Tua Tagovailoa. And unfortunately, I also believe that name means everything. It's because the Heisman is a award, yes. The Heisman is also a branding opportunity. We see it every year with the Heisman House, and most importantly for them, there's people that they have featured in the Heisman House. They can no longer feature for various reasons, whether just or not. It is what it is. Kind of Herschel Walker is like candidate number one. Like, I remember watching Herschel in the commercial all the time. I remember watching Herschel outside the Heisman House doing push-ups. Like that was kind of like my childhood with college football. And now he's not ever going to appear on one of those commercials again. Right? It's just that's why I think since Lamar Jackson, they're very particular of who they select for Heisman. Now that's not discrediting any of the winners, because all the winners like won for a reason. But I think for some players, Devonta Smith, it took a performance even more miraculous than it should have in order for him to win the Heisman. Had he had a slightly above year than what he currently had, but Jalen Waddle was healthy to have similar numbers, I think they would have used the fact that they're similar to give the Heisman to Trevor Lawrence or to somebody else. Maybe Justin Fields. I don't remember who's the final four. That's just again, I might be outrageous and I'm known for my outrageous takes, but I really feel like there's a genuine bias that affects players at the Heisman. And even it's even more than just West Coast bias like years past. Like this is branding bias, so you can have the perfect picture on your TV.
That's a good point. I didn't factor in the branding bias as well. I figured like with any player, you can kind of mold them into like, give him a few lines because that's what script writers are for. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of a writer's strike. So if this lasts till next year, these Heisman House commercials might be a lot more dry.
Bro,
But
I know, bro, I'm a screenwriter, so
okay.
I'm feeling this. I know that's just random. Like sports is what I do on the side 'cause I love it. But like I'm a screenwriter, and like I think people discredit like how much talent and work it takes to be a screenwriter. I'm not doing that to stroke my own ego. I'm just saying, like next year when the Heisman House comes out and it's like god awful, and like they're trying to make Lamar Jackson and Devonta Smith talk about physics for some odd reason, while Barry Sanders doing juke drills in the background, and it's gonna look weird and stupid, and they're gonna have that kind of thing with RG3 being kind of full of himself again. Like it's just appreciate your writers because we're grossly underpaid. None of us ever make a solid living that we can raise a family on, and we're pursuing a dream that majority of us never get to. So support your writers. Support
Yeah,
the writer strike.
I completely
Support this. Support the WGA. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like honestly, it's I feel like a lot of things are gonna come to light for sure. But yeah, that being said, yeah, like I think it'll be I think it's an interesting trend. Like you say, the marketability of the Heisman, I guess and in terms of like the name brands, like you don't see a guy like Ty Detmer in those commercials, or Andre Ware, because they really Houston and BYU aren't really relatively huge brands, and even then, like the guys that come from like relatively like lesser brands in the Power Five, like Lamar Jackson had arguably the most memorable Heisman seasons that we can remember, where like Lamar Jackson was without a doubt the Heisman winner that year. So I guess that being said, okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, a point to add to that. If you look at the Heisman, not the recent Heisman winners, so obviously they do a commercial every year with the recent ones. But if you look at all of them that go there, obviously they're gonna bring the biggest names, but they're gonna bring the biggest programs. For example, I would say Tim Tebow and Florida because it's Tim Tebow in Florida. But you know who they've also featured in there, if I'm not mistaken? Danny Warfel. Who
Right.
remembers Danny Warfel, right? But why? Because he
Yeah.
played quarterback in Florida, and then you compare him with Steve Spurrier, and they have Spurrier, Warfel, Tebow. Like again, just going back to the branding point. That's just an example that I thought of after hearing what you were saying.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point too, because I used to keep track of who's in those commercials, and like now it's just like, it's just I just choose not to. I just don't have time. But I mean, that being said, it's a good segue to our games of the week to watch with where Jackson and I each week pick three or so games. Sometimes we go over, sometimes we go under to watch this week. So Brock, I want to know, I guess we'll alternate. What's your first game of this week to watch?
Oh, great question. I think I gotta shout it out to my guys out in Boulder, Colorado Buffaloes, a team that I was high on this year. I didn't have them that high. I had them ranked as my fifth best team in the Pac-12. A lot of people were like, they're gonna get boat raced against TCU, and I was like, I don't think so because they have Travis Hunter. And people were like, he's just one player. And I'm like, but he's a dude, and a dude locks off one side of the field, and everybody else was like, yeah, but Kendall Briles, and I was like, Kendall Briles and his dad might be shitty people. They're like, what does that do with football? It's like, I don't know, but I don't trust him. Long story short, I was right. Everyone else was wrong. And I think that it's going to be week number two because I don't like Nebraska. I don't like their fan base. I think that they don't actually sell out Memorial Stadium. I'm pretty sure that was just lying about that. And, that's the only thing they can hold on to because they're over 20 years removed from their last national championship appearance. Frank Solich doesn't even coach anymore. He's just at home. And I hate what you guys did to him. And I hate that one of the supporters was Trev Alberts, the guy that you hired to be your AD. It's like you go and you look to the past, but you look to the wrong part of the past when all of y'all did messed up things. So that's why Colorado, Nebraska. I know it's a long-winded answer, but I don't like Nebraska. I love Deion Sanders, and Colorado versus Nebraska is my first pick of the week. The second pick of the week was going to be oddly Purdue and Virginia Tech. Now, I know everyone is like, what the hell? Virginia Tech doesn't seem like close to being back, but they won last week, like comfortably. So I think there's like a relief that they're not like losing really easily winnable. I think it was Old Dominion actually. So a D1 team that they lost to last year. So I think that Lane Stadium is going to be rocking. I think that obviously Brent Pry being a defensive head coach against another defensive head coach and Ryan Walters at Purdue, and that's going to be really interesting. And I think Hudson Card is going to go off in this game. So what I really like about it is that the two head coaches rarely are the defensive guys. So I like that matchup. So I like the X and O scheme part about it. I think the fact that Purdue lost against Fresno State means that they're coming for blood when they enter lane. And for Virginia Tech, it seems like a foundation setting kind of game. Like if they can win, they can put together a good season and maybe become bowl eligible again. Also, last time they were in a bowl game, they got boat raced by Maryland, Mike Loxley, and Talia, if you guys remember. That's kind of the rise of them. This game could be very defining for these coaches, these young coaches' seasons. Obviously, Pride in year two and at Walters in year one. The last game that I'm looking forward to, that is a good question. I guess if I had to pick, as I scroll through these mass amount of games, well, my answer should be Texas Alabama because I'm very excited about that game. But it's actually UCF and Boise State. UCF and Boise State, they're playing in Idaho too. So the last time they played was Gus Malzahn's first, if I'm not mistaken, Gus Malzahn's first year as a head coach, which is also at UCF, which was also Boise State and Diabolos' first game as their head coach. Hank Bachmeier was in the locker room because the game got delayed, entering the Zoom call on the class again 2021, so we're still in COVID protocol. And then Dylan Gabriel went out. Didn't really have a great performance. Boise State was balling. I'm not mistaken, Khalil Shakir was going off that game. But for some reason, Avalos called this odd timeout at the end of the first half that USS somehow turned around to score. So it was like a 4-point lead for Boise instead of a two touchdown. And UCF just smoked them in the second half. So a little bit of bad blood between these coaches because of obviously their first game being so highly intense and such feel dramatically. Secondly, what's not to love about both these teams' offenses? Now, obviously, Boise State didn't have the biggest game against Washington. They only scored 19 points, and half of it came in like garbage time. But there was elements to their passing attack that made you feel that they're getting back to the old ways of the program, when they used to be able to attack people through the air, supplemented by their run game. When Kellen Moore was tossing dots all around the field while Doug Martin was cutting in underneath. That's what you remember. Zabransky and Ian Johnson. For UCF, they have a dude in John Reese Plumlee who put on an excellent performance last week. Plumlee can throw the ball, can run the ball. I actually just wrote an article about him if you guys want to read more at Team NBS Media. But Plumlee is your prototypical athlete because he also plays on the baseball team as well, just like he did when he was at Ole Miss. He is on a mission. I think he's also a dark horse Heisman candidate as well, especially in his offense. And Gus Malzahn looks happy. UCF looks like the best team coming over from wherever the group of the 14 that came over. Their defense is rocking, and I think this could be a tightly contested game. Two coaches looking to rehash, some of the bitter feelings from the first matchup. And you talk about two coaches that are looking to build on what they've been trying to achieve. If he wins this game, Malzahn is 2-0 and is going to be entering, the Big 12 season with momentum. And when a team has momentum, you never know where it can take them. And then for Avalos, there was some doubts on whether he was actually be a head coach, a good head coach for them. And when you look at the past two head coaches, in Brad Harsin and Chris Peterson, how they're being able to jump to Power 5 jobs, I think this is where Avalos wants to cement himself and say, hey, I can be the Power 5 coach as well. Because it's clear that I believe his alma mater is just a stepping stone for better jobs and better financial security. And I don't blame him. So again, this matchup, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, at the time when this one was scheduled, and like I remember the 2021 game, like you said, like I feel like these two programs are at I feel like different places for sure. Like Boise looks like they're in the middle of I guess the long run in their time in the Mountain West, while UCF is starting the new era in the Big 12, of course. Two different places, these programs, but Avalos' turnaround last year after the UTEP game and Taylor Green taking over was amazing. I mean, I think this quarterback matchup is one of the better ones this week for sure. Green versus Plumlee. And at the time this game was scheduled, it was seen as like a matchup between Group of Five Titans. Now, of course, the script is kind of flipped with a conference realignment, but it still has their appeal. And of course, it's never easy to win in the blue turf. And I think Boise State will be hungry after getting blown out by Mike Penix and Washington last week. this past Saturday. I don't think anyone was expecting that. I was expecting just I was expecting Boise State to hang around, not get a 50 burger dropped on them and getting beat by over 30. No one expected that. I actually had Boise State win in the New Year's Six. I still do, but I think it would take the American cannibalizing itself. I think so. I might have to relook at that because Boise State was my preseason New Year's Six pick. But I mean, of course that opens the door for Air Force. I think, which I think fitting enough. Air Force Sam Houston State is my first game. Is my first game to watch this week. I think an under the radar storyline, excuse me, was Air Force versus Robert Morris, seeing how Air Force would continue with the new rule changes, and their offense looks like they didn't skip a beat. I watched some plays, and of course there were some growing pains in having a new quarterback, Zach Larrier, who had a great game, over 90 rushing yards, about 7 yards, 6 or 7 yards a carry, 2 for 3 for 95, excuse me, for 95 yards as well. And then Air Force ran for over 300 yards, I think 6 yards a carry, 7 yards a carry. They had 53 carries for 380 yards. So the Falcons look unaffected by the rule changes and looks like they're continuing as usual. They play Sam Houston State, a team that had a strong showing in their first ever FBS game. The two FBS come ups of this year, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State, have made strong accounts for themselves in this first couple weeks of the season. Sam Houston State only losing to BYU on the road at Lavelle Edwards in the altitude at that, losing 14 to nothing. The defense was strong. I mean, Sam Houston State had 3 turnovers, and that kind of spoiled it for the Bearcats. But on the ground, they allowed only 3 yards of carry against BYU. So you're going to see kind of a immovable object versus the unstoppable force uh, play out between Sam Houston State and Air Force. And I mean, I just like this game because it's at NRG Stadium. It has that big game feel. It kind of shows people that people still care about the academies. The academies still have drawing power. Not really. This game probably won't draw that too great of a crowd because I've heard that Air Force fans never really traveled well to the Commanders Classic in Texas. That was mostly Army fans. But hopefully Air Force fans can prove me wrong. So that's my first game to watch. That game will be 8 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports Network as part of Armed Forces Saturday on CBS Sports Network. As all three service academies have games on CBS Sports Network. With really, it's just Army and Navy have their FCS games the same week, so the branding works. But my next game to watch, I'm gonna shout out Morgan. I'm gonna start. I have two more FCS games for my games to watch. I'm gonna shout out Morgan State, a team that I ranked in my FCS stats poll at 25, a team that got 31 votes this week in the poll because they beat. Honestly, I feel like this was the upset of the weekend in the FCS, rivaling only Clemson Duke in terms of all of college football. As they beat the number 16 team in FCS, Richmond, 17 to 10. The defense was impressive, allowing only 264 yards, and they picked up the slack for an offense that only threw for 99 yards and ran for 114 and ran for 2.5 yards per carry on offense. A bright spot on that offense was Jaron Davis, an elusive back who averaged 6 yards a carry, 12 carries, 73 yards against Richmond, who follows the mold of Alfonso Graham, who I think, I'm not sure if he made the Steelers' final roster, but he was signed by the Steelers in free agency and ran for 1,000 yards for Morgan State. This week they play Akron on the road, and Akron has had a rough go, but Akron looks improved with DJ Irons and everything. They almost beat Temple at the Link. I don't think the Link's a tough place to play because it's always like 20% full when Temple plays there. But that being said, it wasn't in front of a home crowd. Akron didn't score many points. It was 24-21. I think Morgan State's defense needs a big performance, obviously, and the offense needs to pick up some slack, particularly at quarterback. Carson Baker, San Diego State transfer. But I expect the Morgan State Bears to hang around by the way that they play because they ran the ball over 40 times. And with these new clock rules, if they get a lead, if their defense holds strong, these games are shorter. So we were going to see a lot more teams like Morgan State, a lot more FCS teams like Morgan State that like to run the ball, that like to shorten the game, benefit from these rule changes and pull off more upsets. So that game this week is on ESPN Plus at 4 p.m. Mountain Time, so 6 p.m. Eastern, for those of you on the East Coast. And my last game to watch, I'm going to stay in the FCS. I'm going to go with the rivalry that is tried and true. We have the original Holy War, a Holy War that predates Boston College and Notre Dame. We have Holy Cross versus Boston College, a battle between the two preeminent Catholic institutions in America, Holy Cross and Boston College. Sorry, Notre Dame. I say this as I'm literally wearing a Notre Dame shirt, oddly enough. Uh, but
that was played in Yankee Stadium. That's adjacent to.
Yeah,
Wow,
to
that
Boston. Yeah,
is.
a lot of cognitive dissonance here. But that being said, Holy Cross is a team that they're in the top 10 of the FCS stats poll. I ranked them at 7 because I mean I love Holy Cross, but I did not want to be a homer. They do play in the Patriot League, which is a weaker league in the FCS, but Holy Cross has ran through the Patriot League for a four-peat. They're about to, they're on the verge of a five-peat, almost something that's almost unprecedented in college football in terms of conference play. Holy Cross, they have Matthew Sluka, who is a late round sleeper. I mean, the quarterback playing the Patriot League has been amazing the past couple years. If you remember Tim DeMorat this past year for Fordham having an amazing year, almost throwing for 60 touchdowns, I believe. For the Rams, and Matthew Sluka is a great dual threat. Had over 90 yards rushing, went 9 of 14, 190 yards this past week against Merrimack. Not great competition, but Holy Cross has a 2-game win streak against FBS schools. They beat UConn in 2021. They beat Buffalo, who went to a bowl game last year. They beat Buffalo on that Hail Mary. There's I say this without a joke. There is plenty of late round NFL talent in Holy Cross Crusaders, where they have a great wide receiver, Jalen Coker, which I'm not sure. Jackson's huge on the Senior Bowl, as you know, Brock. I'm not sure if you follow Jim Nagy. Um, Jalen Coker has made Small School Saturday, that little board that Jim Nagy keeps. They also have at running back or at linebacker, excuse me. They have Jacob Dobbs, a pro-ready linebacker. Liam Anderson made the Hula Bowl last year for Holy Cross. And Dobbs appears to follow in either the Shrine Bowl, the Hula Bowl, or any of the All-Star games as well. And they have a strong run game, especially like I said with Morgan State. The run game's a big recipe. And Boston College looked very beatable. Of course, losing to Northern Illinois last week. So Holy Cross has not beaten Boston College since 1978. This rivalry took almost a 40-year hiatus. Came back in 2018. This year they meet again for the first time since 2018, only the second time since the 80s. This is a rare opportunity for Holy Cross, and if you love college football, these two have been playing since I think the late 19th century. I got to pull up the stats, but they've been playing since the late 19th century. Back in the 1930s and 40s, this was the game on the East Coast. So if you love nostalgia, if you love upsets, if you want to preview at some late round NFL talent, this game has it all. Holy Cross, Boston College. I'm going to say it here on the podcast. I think Holy Cross beats Boston College, takes care of business.
Wow. I mean, I understand. I think Boston College is a little bit too athletic, especially the quarterback position for that Holy Cross defense to handle. But you never know. And something I will talk about real quick is the appreciation for what we have in terms of traditions before we lose them, because we're about to lose them. Games like this need to be played every year. The battle for the Palouse needs to be played every year. All right. When they move, USC Notre Dame needs to be played every year. Michigan and Notre Dame should be played again every year. These are historic football games that connect a thread of people to generations of stories of good times and great fun. I bet that there is a thread in the state of Texas. Texas and Texas A&M would play each other on Thanksgiving Day, where every game, every TV was turned to that game. Every eye in Texas had on it, as not their plates of food on that fateful day. And you can go back to the years on both sides and discuss from grandpa to little grandchild their memories of those games throughout the years, people that they love. This is much more than just about redoing something that we did last year. This is about something that means something in this life. This world is so crazy at times that we fail to have any type of normality. I mean, that's how life is supposed to be. But to have one thing that unites everyone at one time and to enjoy it and to purposefully ruin that in the pursuit of money is absolutely devastating and unacceptable. And that is why when teams like Holy Cross and Boston College meet, you appreciate it because you don't know how long it's going to last. And for those rivalries that have defined my childhood, obviously Notre Dame, USC, Battle of the Palouse, and what was the other one? It's not coming to mind right now. Oh, Bedlam. Thank you, Bedlam. These mean something, especially those in-state ones. In fact, Oklahoma State aren't going to face each other. It's madness. In fact, Texas A&M are going to finally face each other. next, I think one of these following seasons, after like 10 years of not having a game that lasted almost 100, that was literally one of the plot points in Little Whorehouse in Texas. Like, what the hell? Let's let's hopefully in the future we can make an initiative to bring these games back so that we can once again have generations of people relate to this one thing or that one moment or that one play. Like these rivalries do.
I think it's well said, really. I mean, games like, yeah, like even though like, this Holy Cross Boston College was interrupted by the shifting of divisions and scholarship numbers with the Patriot League and whatnot, and now we're just getting back to it. But games like this are what we cherish. What college football used to look like. Big games, and I feel like, I mean, I feel inclined to say, like, if you want the true heart of college football, watch the FCS and below. And you'll see the true heart where these rivalries still matter and everything. So Holy Cross is, the heart of college football is games like Holy Cross versus Boston College, games like intersectional games like Purdue Virginia Tech or also like neutral site games like Air Force Sam Houston State, where national programs that mean something to the heart of American people like Air Force, get to play, and it's treated like a special occasion. So this week, savor it like any other week of college football, but this week has plenty of special matchups as shown by our matchups of the week. But Brock, I mean, do you have anything final you'd like to plug or say before we cut this thing loose?
Yeah, a couple things. One, if you want to find me at Twitter at MNS Today. Once again, that's at MNS Today. Follow me, I follow back. When I can, sometimes I follow. Twitter doesn't allow me to follow. Still trying to work this thing out. I'm not good at technology. Check out my work, also Midnight Sports Today. That has some of my earlier work. If you want to go back a little bit, I have a lot of stuff on the Hawaii Warriors. I even did something with Omar and special teams coach Jeff Reinbold, where we did the top our greatest Hawaii Warriors of all time. Also have that YouTube channel. Omar and Jackson have been on there a bunch of times, so check that out. And then you can find my current work at Team NBS Media, uh, media company that they go with sports, cooking, media, like shows, entertainment, all kinds of things, lifestyle. Great group of guys, a group of people I work with. You can check out some of my articles on players. Released one on Jaden Ott and Jarvis Plumley. So check out those. And then I also cover Hawaii football, UNLV football, Pac-12 West Coast football. I'm going to be starting my Big Sky stuff on the Big Sky because I love Pacific Northwest football and a bunch of other stuff on there. So before I go, I just want to add that another rivalry like Holy Cross and Boston College that has ended is Washington and Montana. And for two states so close to only broken up by a sliver called Idaho, we're never going to see this rivalry again. And I think having FCS and FBS teams play each other in historic matchups is great because the FCS teams always rise to the occasion, and the FBS teams always go out there like they have something to prove. And when you have these clash of styles, it can create fireworks. Um, the part that of this conference realignment that I'm really hating is, like I mentioned, these regional matchups disappearing. And I want to touch on one real quick, and that is the Apple Cup. The Apple Cup was this weird kind of thing for me because a lot of Hawaii people enjoyed watching Washington State, while a lot of um, Hawaii people lived and went to UW. There's this very like odd connection. And my cousin, his wife actually, Gina, was one of the people that actually went to UW for pharmaceutical. So shout out to Gina. But you got to see this concoction of purple and white and this like darkish colors red and white. And they would go over to Pullman, they go back to Seattle, and it all be high scoring, high flying, great passing. I mean, Washington State with under Mike Price and that spread offense with Bledsoe and Ryan Leaf. And you think about the quarterbacks at UW like Brock Horde and Damon Horde, I think was at Heward at that time, and then you also had Marquise Tuiasosopo, and all these great quarterbacks, and even Jake Locker. And you just saw that pass, and because of the connection to it, it was always fun to watch. And then you grow a little older, you appreciate the game. You had Peterson versus Leach, and you had air raid versus spread, and even later the fact that Rolovich and Jimmy Lake never played each other, like, because of various reasons. You had all these great storylines in the Pacific Northwest, which is one of the most beautiful places in the United States. And you had Jan Delora planting the flag in Husky Stadium, and then last year that shootout between Cam Moore and Michael Pratt Jr. This rivalry is so underrated, but means so much to me and for a lot of people that are fans of Pacific Northwest football for its luster, its glory, and its championship implications. And we're gonna lose it forever. Like, what do we gain from this for Washington to play Michigan all the time or Ohio State to play UCLA? Who cares? That's the whole point of the Rose Bowl. Like, regional in-state rivalries mean something. Even for people that don't watch sports, if their families do, then that's the game that they watch. If they'll watch one game a year. It's that game because it means something for the family. It's the unit. It's the love that they share together, and the love that they share together with that one thing or that one team, and how they live and die with the highs and lows, the passion and the pain. That means something. And to take that away from the future generations for a little coin just doesn't make sense. I know I rambled on about that, but I never got a chance to talk about the rivalries before, and they mean something. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I think it's well said. I mean, and this week showcases that this is one of the last, I guess, seasons before. This is the last season before a new era of college football, and we'll just
So
see how it
enjoy
plays
it.
out. So you gotta enjoy it. I'm not a doomsday scenario person, but I do see a lot of stuff changing that I'm not happy about. But we'll take what we can from this year and go on from it. So that being said, enjoy week 2, everyone, and until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.